It's weird not being on like Zoom, like where you see Aaron giving us all the directions and then.
Well, good evening. Good evening and welcome. It is Thursday, April 22nd, 2021. Time is 6:30 p.m. and this is a regular scheduled meeting of the District 191 Board of Education. Welcome to everybody in the room, and welcome to those that are watching at home live or later at a recording session. Director Hume, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please, this evening?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. We'll begin with approval of tonight's agenda. Seek a motion for that.
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester.
Second.
Seconded by Director Alt. Yes. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Hume.
Aye.
Connor.
Aye.
Chester.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Saeed.
She's not yet in attendance.
Okay. Alt.
Aye.
Werb. Aye.
The motion passes unanimously for all those in attendance. We will now move to the information section of tonight's meeting, beginning with the presentation on Radon, a final report for 6 buildings. Speaking on this subject is Dave Lake, our Director of Operations and Transportation. Mr. Lake, the microphone is yours.
Is he on mute?
May just be having technical difficulties. Yeah, or texting.
Oh, he's there. This doesn't. He's on mute.
Is he on mute? He's on mute. He wasn't to start. Oh.
Apologize, I'm having some difficulties getting my video up. Can you hear me?
We hear
Yes.
you. Welcome to 2021, right?
All right, thanks. Dr. Battle, school board members, and Chair Miller, I would like to share with you the District 191 final report short-term radon monitoring project at the following sites: Gideon Pond, Harriet Bishop, Vista View, Edward Neal, Ron, and William Byrne. Field Environmental Consulting was authorized by me to conduct the short-term radon monitoring at the aforementioned locations. MDH requires that detectors be placed and retrieved on school days only between November 1 and March 31 under conditions that reasonably characterize radon hazards. Field Environmental did follow the MDH published guidance for radon testing in Minnesota schools, September 2018 document. Floor plans of the buildings with detailed information were provided to Field Environmental by me to include building foundation types, basement and crawl spaces, additions to the original building, as well as each structurally isolated airspace. General design and intended purpose, as well as unique sections for HVAC systems were also included. MDH notice of inspection for all facilitating staff form was sent to staff working in the aforementioned buildings. I also signed and acknowledged the declaration of observation of compliance section of the form. A few days prior to the test, Field Environmental was directed by me to distribute, directed me to distribute the MDH notice of inspection for building occupants to appropriate people at those sites. The radon monitoring project was conducted during this recommended operating condition. Therefore, test results should reasonably characterize radon hazards. Per Minnesota statute, a school district that has tested its school buildings for the presence of radon shall report the results of its test to the Department of Health and report results to the school board. Getting into some of the numbers, you'll see there's an attachment there below. with more detail. But radon levels are measured in picocuries per liter, or PCI over L. EPA and MDH action level for indoor radon is 4.0. 6 sites and schools were included in this radon project, and overall 371 samples were retrieved and analyzed. To summarize, no radon levels above the action level of 4.0 were identified for any locations at any of these schools. All remaining sites and schools will be tested after November 1 per MDH recommendations. I apologize for my video issues here, but thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Board members, any questions or comments for Mr. Lake?
I just have one.
Yes, Director Hume.
How often are the schools tested for radon?
So the state strongly recommends, it's not a requirement, but they strongly recommend every 5 years. And so we last conducted ours in 2016, and then 5 years later this year in 2021. So we do half in the spring and then half in the fall. What MDH recommends is that you do it at the conditions, basically your heating season, or the conditions where radon would spring up if there was detectable levels.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lake. I just clarification. So you say half in the spring, half in the fall. I just noticed that they're all elementary, so I assume the rest of our buildings will be part of the test plan in the fall then. And does that include Diamond Head?
Yes, so all buildings, so we have 11 more to go after November 1.
Okay. All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you. We'll now move to the next part of our information, part of our meeting tonight, with an update about our strategic plan process. Presenting will be Dr. Battle, Superintendent, and Aaron Tinkelberg, Director of Communications.
Thank you, Chair Miller and directors of the board. As you are aware, the current strategic district roadmap is for the years 2015 through 2020. We have previously provided some updates on our work to develop the new strategic roadmap. And so tonight, Aaron Tinklenberg and I will share some information about where we are in the process, as well as some next steps. And so I'll first share the overview. We will once again share the purpose, components, and next steps. And the why, as I just stated, we are in need of a new strategic roadmap. As we designed the process to develop the new roadmap, we identified some driving questions. Where should our district be in the long run? Or what is our vision in terms of our educational programs, student achievement facilities, and financing? So what do we value? How do we align our resources? And we define resources as time, money, and people to the new strategic vision. How are we performing educationally, financially, and managerially? Previously, we did share a draft dashboard with you. How do parents know we fulfilled our promise for their children? And lastly, how do we measure progress and success? And now I'll turn it over to Aaron Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Dr. Battle, Chair Miller, and members of the board. Happy to be sharing this process with you tonight. I know that you've gotten some of this information before in informal communications, but it's good to be presenting it to the public as well. Just to go over some of the components of this strategic vision update. And the first thing I kind of want to say is that this isn't an entirely new or overhaul of the strategic plan. What we've gleaned from staff members, from the public, from students, even in informal conversations in the past year and a half, through our branding identification and process last spring as well and into the fall, and some more formal meetings over the summer and then this fall, is that people really identify with our vision, with our mission as a school district. They identify with where we're headed as a school district. They feel strongly supportive of our approach, the approach that we're taking that includes things like pathways, culturally proficient school systems, and those kinds of things. So it's not so much that there needs to be, we didn't find that there was a need for an entirely new process, So we've been kind of calling it a review and a revision or a refresh of the strategic plan. So just to talk a little bit about that, the first component is that review and revise strategic vision and values, the core values that are part of the roadmap. That process included public engagement in the fall of 2020, a thought exchange program. It included earlier this spring in March a report and on that engagement, the results, and a draft vision. Now, over the last week, we also conducted another thought exchange where people gave us feedback and input on that draft vision and new core values. Now, this week we'll be receiving a report on that. We'll revise those draft vision and values, and then we'll bring that back to the board to consider in May. The first meeting it'll be part of a workshop where we can just talk about it, and then if the board is prepared, we would adopt those newly as part of the strategic roadmap in the second meeting in May. The second component is reviewing and revising the strategic directions. So this is aligning our actual work with that vision and core values. We have strategic directions as part of the roadmap now. In light of new vision and values, it makes sense to review those strategic directions and possibly create new ones. This will be primarily leadership work since it's going to be work carried out by the school district staff. So the superintendent's team, but also department and staff leaders from around the district. There'll be 2 workshops planned in May or June, and the board adoption process would be similar to the vision and values where we bring it forward for discussion and then potential adoption after that. This process also aligns with the systemic review that's been proposed as part of or really planned as part of the budget process this year. That's system-wide review of are we doing the things that we want to do? Are we doing them efficiently and effectively? How do we compare? How can we make sure that we're on the right track? That's the second component. The third component, or a pair of components, would be a strategic dashboard and a pathways profile. These are things that, again, as Dr. Battle mentioned, we brought to the board in the fall just as drafts, as ideas. The dashboard would really help us show at the board level and the public, here are the things we value, and here's how we're measuring them to show that we're meeting our goals or where we're falling behind and where we need to put more effort, more focus. There'd be key metrics, as it says there, for each strategic direction. Then the pathways profile is really the idea is to help describe to parents what it means to be a pathways district, what it means for their student to experience that pathways process throughout from pre-K through 12. So it's not just about what will you look like when you graduate, where we see profiles of graduates, but it's really about the whole process. So skills learned and experiences at these benchmark grades. Again, as a parent, I could say, well, I know what it's like for my child to be in kindergarten because that's where they are now. What's it going to be like in 3rd grade? Why would I want to stay here and be here in 5th grade and 8th grade and 12th grade? And that's the idea there, is to really make it clear to parents what that is. And then in terms of next steps, as I mentioned, bringing the vision and values to the board in May, drafting strategic directions, and then and adopting them either in the summer or in the fall as is appropriate, and then finalizing the dashboard and pathways profile, hopefully sometime in the fall as well. And that is the update on the strategic roadmap update process, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board members?
Thank you, Aaron. I just wanted to say that this is so exciting. I really appreciate, looking back at when the strategic plan was last revised and probably the first time that it was created. I know, the broad input that we're enjoying right now from families and students was not quite part of that process. So I think this is really going to make our strategic plan and our directions much more concrete. And it's also great to hear that, it's not a revamping. It's, families are generally on board and supportive, and we need to make some tweaks. I also I'm looking forward to the dashboard. Surprise, surprise, because I think, in terms of laying out that map for our students and our families from whether it's pre-K, kindergarten, all the way through graduation, the one document that I've seen that comes to mind that really reflects that is the tech curriculum, right? Where we mapped out exactly what students need to learn, the skills that they need to have. And so to have that at a broad level across the district, I'm just really looking forward to that, because I know it'll encompass, obviously achievement, success, health and wellness. So thank you.
Thank you. I agree.
Other questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you for your presentation tonight, Aaron. I know that you've done quite a lot of work on this. I also know that you're representing quite a lot of other folks that have done a lot of work on this, so extended thanks to everybody involved. And I think one of the things I appreciate is the remembrance that this is a vision statement. Sometimes those can get tactical when they really need to be strategic, and that does not seem to be that we've strayed from that path at this time yet, so I appreciate that. There are things that when you first read it, you think, well, we should maybe include this, that, and then you step back and say, you know what, if we cover the bases we've just talked about, those things will fall in line behind it, so it's important. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Next, we're going to move to a report about the Joint Powers Agreement, JPA, with the West Metro School Districts, presenting tonight, for network collaboration. Tonight, presenting Rachel Gordon, Director of Technology. Ms. Gordon.
Good evening, Chair Miller, board members, and Superintendent Battle. Tonight I'm here with an informational report on our option to join the West Metro School Districts for Network Collaborative Joint Powers Agreement. Joining the West Metro JPA by June 30th, 2021 will provide us with an avenue to continue to receive reimbursement of the Minnesota Telecommunications and Internet Access Equity Program aid. This is funding that reimburses districts for internet, video connectivity, and related telecommunications as defined by the federal E-rate program. The result is an extra reimbursement coming to us for internet services. The amount varies slightly from year to year, but it's approximately a 40% reimbursement of our after E-rate internet costs. In 2019 to 2020, our Minnesota telecommunication aid reimbursement was $20,700. So why the change? Last October, Sourcewell, which serves as our current JPA, informed us that they were discontinuing internet service provider services for all of their customers. Our ISP contract with Sourcewell will end on June 30th, and at that time, we will lose our ability to utilize the JPA for future years. Our new ISP vendor does not qualify JPA for this aid, and I will note that none of the ISP vendors that responded to our E-rate RFP qualified. After a review of our options, our recommendation is that we join the West Metro JPA so that we do not lose out on these reimbursement funds. A little bit about the West Metro JPA. It was started in 2017 by districts that were leaving ties to ensure that they could continue the Minnesota telecommunications funding, that it would still be available to them. The agreement language was developed by districts that were very concerned about entering into another binding agreement, and therefore allows any district to leave at any time. There are no costs to join, there's no bank account, and there are no management costs. Some West Metro districts do partner to purchase and maintain fiber that is mutually beneficial, but our involvement would solely be to recuperate the telecommunications aid funding. Our financial cost would be less than $200 per year to work with our current E-rate consultant to file reimbursement documents. The agreement is a take-as-is option, as we do not have the option to make any changes. ISD 191 is not required to join this JPA. The recommendation, however, is to join so that we can be reimbursed this additional amount. And with that, I'll take if there's any questions.
Yep, thank you, Director Gordon. Any questions for on this subject matter? Yes.
Rachel, sorry, I didn't hear. How did the joint power agreement come to be? How did it get started? Did you say?
Yeah. So ties used to be the JPA for most of the districts in Minnesota. And as ties started to have some financial difficulties, there were districts that left ties, but that aid requires a JPA agreement is in place in order to get the reimbursement. So the districts that were leaving ties decided that they would create their own JPA with much not as restrictive language. So there's a lot of districts that had a lot of open wounds from what happened with ties. And so they went ahead and created this JPA. There were about, at the very beginning, I think there were about 6 or 7 districts that participated. Now there are, I believe it's up to 12 districts that are part of the JPA.
Any of our neighboring districts involved?
Yep, Lakeville is a part of it, so is Richfield.
All right, thank you, Rachel.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Director Alt?
So, thank you, Rachel. Understanding that, this is an as-is agreement, I also noticed that, the members can amend the language of the JPA. And I guess, the questions that were asked in advance in terms of the looseness of the language, the fact that this board is being asked to approve an agreement that gives a head nod toward Robert's rules as it's basically the governing meeting procedures. And you couldn't tell me either way if the board actually does use Robert's rules or not. I do have concerns about that in terms of the general operations and business of that board if Robert's rules is not followed, for example, for voting procedures, for making amendments. There's a reason why Robert's rules is used, and it's unusual, for me at least, to see that it's, there's not even a mention as to the addition that's used. There are other obvious problems with the loose language as well, but basically you're saying there's no option to change. The position is we take it as it is.
Yeah, that's the option. I can certainly get some clarification if you'd like. I can tap into the folks that are currently part of the JPA and find out more information about that. I did have a conversation yesterday with Steve Butner, who is the Director of Technology in Edina, and was one of the original writers of the agreement. Mm-hmm. And I did pose a question about how the board is governed and Robert's rules. And he said that they do use Robert's rules, although it sounds like it's not as detailed. When I asked about the version, I did not get an answer from that.
And I guess the other question is, has our attorney reviewed this?
We did not have our attorney review this, in part because there were no changes that we were able to make. That is a step that we could take.
I would think if we're going to be creating a new municipality with this agreement, given the looseness of this language, and speaking for myself, having lived through the disintegration of ties, I am very sensitive to entering into another JPA based on tech. And I'm not entirely convinced that this JPA is tight enough to really protect our best interests. That'll be all for now.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions?
But you did say we're not under contract with them, though, right?
There's no contract. No, you can leave at any time, and there's no financial obligation that you would be held accountable to.
I have a question. So you said there was no other RFPs that came in for these types of services. Is that correct?
Yeah. So for the E-rate program for our internet service, we utilize E-rate funds, and so it's a very tight. There's RFP process that needs to go through. So we went through that in December into January and February. And we received back 3 options for our ISP contract for starting July 1st. And none of the vendors qualify as a JPA, and which is really common. It's actually quite uncommon for the ISP to be a JPA now. So Sourcewell was kind of the last as they took it over from Ties, and we kind of inherited our account for that. So, but they are completely moving out of the ISP service altogether.
typically are these types of vendors by location? I mean, what do other districts, are these the only options? Is this the only option for our district? I mean, it's kind of like, are we just forced into making an agreement with this only provider because they're the only ones? I mean, we don't have any other options?
I had quite a bit of conversation with Sourcewell to find out if we could just stay on, but that is not an option. And then really there are two JPAs. One is with 96 Northeast 916 Metro Intermediate, but they only accept their members. So if we want to tap into it, the West Metro, some districts have created their own, but there's a significant amount of documentation and filing that has to be done on an annual basis, and so, or at least to get it up and running. So this is the only option that we have available to us. There are other districts that just choose not to ask for the reimbursement at all.
So that's the other option, is just to not have it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for your patience with all these questions. Is there a deadline for this? Did you mention a deadline for this that we have to make a decision by?
Yep, the deadline would be June 30th. We would have to have the agreement accepted. And it's interesting because a Minnesota Telecommunications Aid is a year out. So actually for next year, we will be filing it through Sourcewell. So this is going to be 2 years out that we would have, if we don't have a new JPA in effect by June 30th of this year, then it's funding 2 years down the line that we'll be losing out on.
Thank you.
I have one question. What is the savings reimbursement that we typically receive?
About $20,000 a year.
I think, speaking for myself, I would, recognizing that there are no bank accounts involved. This is a very limited JPA from what you're describing, Rachel. But not being a legal professional myself, I'd like to understand the implications, what possible negative implications there might be to entering this. $20,000 is nothing to sniff at. At the same time, I'd like to understand that we're not putting ourselves in harm's way based on the language as it currently exists.
Okay, so I think to honor Director Alt's request, we will have our attorney take a quick look at the document, looking for future, let's just say, possible power moves or misabuse of the situation. I will just, for those that, Director Alt and I lived through the TIES event, and TIES was an interesting thing that came with the kind of the creation of the internet in the Twin Cities, and it was sort of a natural development that there was a lot of districts that didn't have the resources to get into this new thing called the internet, and they banded together. Then they kind of mutually agreed to a larger organization. We were part of that, and what happened at the end was when it collapsed and the house of cards fell in on itself, we were looking at potentially many hundreds of thousands of dollars in liability, and it was a very scary event that we managed to scrape out of. But appreciate the concern given that environment. To me, this sounds more like just a fancy purchase agreement or a purchasing group, so to speak. And I'm not as concerned as some of this, it's been expressed here tonight that it will open doors to get us back to where we were with TIES. Especially because everybody involved went down that road together with us. But having said that, I do think it would be a good process to make sure that opportunity doesn't exist by reviewing the documentation. At this point, as has been expressed, really our sole exposure is if something comes up and something's decided and we don't feel like it's in the best interest moving forward, we would simply transition off of their networks, which has its own transitioning costs, but we'd be experiencing that up front now if we did it anyway. So, Okay,
Yeah, and just one clarification, we actually aren't on their networks at all. So this does not connect our networks at all. So if something was decided and we chose that it was not in our best interest, we would simply leave. And there would be no additional cost or action on our part to disconnect our system. So it's not a network, we're not connecting into other systems.
and I will say that the ties experience, as frustrating as it was at the end, that really was more about the sort of dissolution of a power structure and the monies involved. The networks and the result, I don't know that we ever had any sort of long-term or heartburn over how the situation worked technology-wise. There was a few app standouts here and there, but for the most part, certainly the internet connectivity, which was the component we're talking about here, worked the way it was supposed to. But okay. We'll now, thank you, Rachel, thank you for that. We'll now move to a report about end-of-year learning plans. Dr. Battle, Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Miller, directors of the board members. Based on many factors affecting our schools, I am announcing that District 191 secondary schools will not expand in-person learning for the remainder of the 2021-22 school year. We will continue in the hybrid model we are currently using, where students attend in person 2 days per week, as long as public health conditions and other factors such as staffing do not require a switch to distance learning. This decision does not affect students who are currently attending 191's virtual academy. This is not a decision I've come to lightly, and I've reached it after consulting with our COVID-19 advisory committee, hearing from staff members, and gathering input from parents. In the end, the factors that support this decision include rising community cases of COVID-19. As of Thursday, April 22nd, today, new cases per 10,000 residents have risen over 50 in both Dakota and Scott County, and later you will hear the actual numbers. Scott County did rise over 60. So more detailed information will be provided in the COVID report. The cases are more heavily within our student and parent age groups. And today at 11 a.m. press conference, Minnesota Department of Health Commissioner Jan Malcolm gave the details, and more will be covered in our report. A high positive result rate for tests, which is over 5%, the greater virulence of the B.1.117 variant, the greater risk of high numbers of students being quarantined because of the nature of student schedules at the middle and high school level, a desire to protect activities, athletics, and end-of-year events such as prom and graduation, avoiding another disruptive transition, which would include schedule and teacher assignment changes affecting both student learning and staff working conditions. And so I previously mentioned that we will provide more detail about the factors that prompted my decision. And so that concludes this report on the secondary learning models, and more details will be given in the next agenda item, the COVID-19 report.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or comments for Dr. Battle? All right, before we proceed to your COVID-related report, I would just like to recognize the challenging decision this was for Dr. Battle. And, you know, as she alluded to, this is not just a numbers game. Unfortunately, many people fall into that misunderstanding. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that, unless you're inside the factory watching the sausage be made, you wouldn't understand is part of the consideration set. The pebbles fall in the water and splash very far out. As chair of this board, I was very clear with Dr. Battle that she has our 100% support in this decision, and that we encourage her to do the best thing to get through the rest of the year safely. with the least amount of interruption and disturbance to all of our families. So thank you for that decision. I know we recognize how hard that was, and we are the ones ultimately that made that decision. We simply gave you the keys to pick it. So stands with us.
Thank you, Chair Miller.
Yep, so next we'll move to next item on the agenda to receive an update about District 191's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance issued by the MDE and the MDH respectively. Again, Dr. Battle.
Yes, Chair and Directors, tonight staff and I will share information related to primary areas of our planning. First and foremost, health and safety, new Minnesota Department of Health and Minnesota Department of Education guidance, and more information regarding our secondary learning model decision that I just announced. So first, with the county updates, the county confirmed cases represents cases from 328 to 410. Dakota County is 57.84, an increase from 52.06. Scott County is 69.33, an increase from 67.94. Today, we received new guidance related to athletics and Minnesota's COVID-19 screening program and vaccination program from MDH and MDE. MDH has revised Minnesota's Safe Learning Plan guidance for activities. MDH is now not requiring masks for outdoor sports when athletes are actively engaged in practice or competition. This is the same guidance given for fall outdoor athletic events. Spectators, coaches, and officials are all still mandated to wear masks. Also, the COVID-19 saliva testing guide for schools has been updated to include information on how to offer testing for students along with our existing staff testing programs. So just a reminder, every 2 weeks our staff has the opportunity to participate in saliva testing at our sites. This update is prompted by Minnesota experiencing a high circulation of variants of COVID-19. Commissioner Heather Mueller, Minnesota Department of Education, shared with superintendents and charter school leaders. For example, it is currently estimated that 60% of all COVID-19 cases in Minnesota are the B.1.1.7 variant that spreads more easily. This is contributing to a sharp increase in COVID-19 cases statewide, as you see reflected in our numbers for Dakota and Scott County. More specifically, we are seeing increased cases concentrated in school-age population, especially middle and high school students. The Minnesota Department of Health has continued to emphasize the importance of COVID-19 testing in slowing the spread. As a result, Minnesota Department of Education are asking schools to help make testing more accessible to our students by promoting existing testing opportunities in our respective communities, and consider offering testing opportunities for students on site in middle or high school buildings. And they gave us a few options. So our team, since we just received this today, we will be taking a look at those options, and we will inform the board, and then we'll inform our families about the testing opportunities for our students. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Gersich, Bernie Bean, Stephanie White, and Lisa Ryder to go through the presentation. I believe Bernie is first.
Okay, you can advance to the next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to focus a little bit on the health piece of our learning model key indicators. As Dr. Battle said, the time frame for the 14-day was March 28th to April 10th. Dakota County does predict that next time period, next week, they should be about the same. Positivity rate for this week for Minnesota is 6.8%, which is an increase from 6.5%. Dakota County is at 8.6%, which is an increase from 8.2%. Scott County is at 9.3%, which is an increase from 8.8%. Other data pertaining to Dakota County is their 7-day average for positive cases is at 161, which is a slight decrease from last week of 177. And Minnesota in general has also seen just a little bit of a slow decrease in the daily case rates. We're hopeful that maybe that means the surge is plateauing a little bit. However, I do say that cautiously because we still are in a pandemic and we still do have high numbers. Dakota County, no different than Minnesota, has seen the largest growth in the ages of 10 to 19 and then 40 to 49-year-olds. Also in Dakota County, there has been no long-term care positive cases this week and no death in that age group. So that is a success. In terms of positive cases in our school during that time, which was March 28th to April 10th, Health Services completed 8 case investigations for individuals that were determined to be infectious in the school. The period prior to this 14-day period, we had 5 investigations. Next week, the 14-day period data point will increase to 19 case investigations that were completed. However, after that, we are starting to see a trend to go down. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to give you a little bit more information about our dashboard for the period of the week ending April 16th, and you can compare it to the week that's shown on the screen as April 10th. So active student cases for last week, we had 12 active student cases and no staff cases. For the weekly exposed quarantine, or what I call the effects of COVID, so that might be someone being home because they're sick, they're caring for an ill child or an adult, or they are in quarantine. For our student population, we had 262 students out at the end of the week, and we had 17 staff members out at the end of the week. The cumulative cases since September 1st, and that is cumulative in the sense that those are individuals that were infectious in our building and not infectious in our building. For students, we have 213 known cases, and for staff, we have 92. Forecasting for next week, for active cases where we've done investigations, for staff, it will be 0. And for students, so far this week, we have done 3 investigations. So we're starting to see a little bit of a trend downward. Next slide. So on to some of the exciting partnerships that we have going on. As Dr. Battle talked about, we continue to do our saliva screening for staff every other week. Monday is our next scheduled date. And MDH has just disseminated information about offering more opportunities for our students, and that is still being worked out, and we just got that information today, so we have a lot to do yet on that. So with vaccinations, more and more vaccines are coming to our state, and that is really exciting. We have our local public health that are working to vaccinate our community, and actually Dakota County has said that this is a milestone number for them. 50% of residents that are 16 years and older have had at least 1 dose of vaccine in Dakota County. Scott County has just opened up a clinic for our 16, 17, and our 18-year-olds. And as we get this information, we push it out to our families to take part of that if they choose to do that. Last board meeting, we talked a little bit about the FEMA project at the state fairground. We have been fortunate that after reaching out to them, they are going to host, or they're going to conduct a pop-up community testing or vaccination clinic site at our Burnsville High School. We just got the okay from MDH and through the FEMA that they can secure the vaccine for us. And we just learned that information yesterday that it was secured. So our clinics will be next week. More information will be pushed out to families for our 16, 17-year-olds at the Burnsville High School. So exciting things are coming, and really with all of the new opportunities, it really gives us a little bit of a glimmer of hope of what a normal school year might look like in the fall. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Brian, can I add some more data I just received this afternoon from Scott County? So Bernie mentioned the percentage of residents vaccinated in Dakota County. Scott County is also in the 50%. They will be much more comfortable if they're at 70%. And so they too are now going to, they have offered a clinic for 16 and 17-year-olds this week. They had 600 of those students, Savage residents, and we did have our 191 students who live in Savage. The director of public health for Scott County did report back to superintendent, so our students did take advantage of that opportunity. So wanted to share that both counties are pretty much in the same place for vaccinations for their residents. Thank you, Brian.
Yep, thank you, Dr. Battle. And I'll just be brief. Some of this is information that was shared by Dr. Battle in her remarks in the previous item where she was talking about our learning models and sticking to the hybrid model. And that is just to summarize that the advisory team, which again is made up of parents, administration, members of bargaining units, Chair Miller is a member of that group, was a strong consensus to support that decision to remain in hybrid for the course of the school year. Part of it is based on the fact that our hybrid model has been strong. And our safety measures have been strong. And even though you hear hybrid through all the different districts, not all hybrid models are created the same. And the team is really proud of what we've been able to do with our hybrid model to create some strong learning environments under the circumstances. We also have a concern that moving too fast creates disruption and inconsistent routines. We've talked a number of times in these reports about the fact that it is still a close contact when individuals are within 6 feet for certain periods of time. And if we're going to set students up and bring them back, more students in person, we're going to have to set them 3 to 4 feet apart. That increases the likelihood or the number of close contacts, which increases the number of students who have that disruption when they need to suddenly be quarantined for up to 14 days. And then also talking about the populations of students that are impacted. Those routines at least create predictability for families. Sudden quarantines do not. Dr. Battle talked about the desire to protect events. Students who are quarantined do not get to participate in these extra things like prom, graduation, or activities in sports that we know are very important to our students. So our committee wants kids back in school, but certainly supports the fact that we've been keeping students safe. We are close to the end of the school year, and the potential benefit seems to be outweighed by the risks involved, and would really like the team to focus on getting back in person for the fall. There's also that discussion, and I know Stephanie White is going to talk in a minute with a little more detail about our Learning Plus. We still have the ability for those students who may benefit from additional time in school academically or emotionally. We have the ability to increase the number of days, certainly for a certain number of students. If we could do it for all students, we would certainly do that. But we have more space for students to come in more frequently as a part of that Learning Plus, so that it is potential for some to come into school for the middle schools and high school 4 days a week. We have students doing that right now. We could do that more. And again, I'll turn it to Stephanie White, who can talk a bit more about the Learning Plus.
Thank you. Learning Plus is the opportunity for our secondary buildings to individualize based on the needs of any student that is attending. This can be for social emotional reasons. It can also be for academic reasons. And so I'm going to give you an example. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about what the high school is doing, but rest assured each school is able to implement this, and we have some really great success stories.
high school has identified 114 students that participate in both cohorts. So they come 2 days with the A cohort, and then they come 2 days with the B cohort. These are students that were all virtual students, but were not participating and were not engaging. But momentum was gained quickly when they were able to provide 4 days a week for these students. The reasons are complicated, why this would be beneficial to a student, and it's very individualized. And they're adhering still, of course, to the health and safety protocols that we have provided them. What this demonstrates is how nimble and flexible our staff have been to respond to each and every student. And we're very proud of the way they've customized what each student needs. I guess I want to also just recognize, the reflection of the difficult year on students and how proud we should be of our students to continue to try and engage in their learning and accept the help and the new ideas from the staff at the high school in order to be successful. And I'll turn it back to Brian. Oh, Lisa, sorry, to Lisa.
Thank you. So for the conversation around the middle school Club Nicollet, I would just like to make sure that all families are aware of the, given the continuation of our hybrid model, we just want to remind folks of the fact that we do have a fee-based program that is available for our middle schoolers. It is called Club Nicollet. It is located at Nicollet Middle School. And so if families are interested in some type of care for our grades 6 through 8 students, care is available from 7 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we just want to point that out to folks, and if you are interested in learning more, you can certainly go to the website as well for Club Nicollet information, but you can contact this email address in order to reach the person who is in charge of registration and getting information out to families. So feel free to do so, and that's an opportunity we just want to make sure all of our middle school families are aware of. Thank you.
And before I conclude our report, Stephanie White mentioned about our youth and the wonderful job they are adhering to the protocols. Just to let you know, the picture for her slide was pre-COVID. So they are wearing their mask in person. But also Dakota County recognized all of the youth in Dakota County for all that they've been through this last year and really thank them. So we do want to note that. And that concludes the COVID-19 report for this evening.
Okay, thank you for everybody that was presenting. I will open it up for questions or comments from board members.
I just have one. So as we're preparing to have gatherings like prom or graduation, are we going to receive some information about graduation coming? Because it's one of the highlights of being a school board member. So just wondering if we'll get a little update about that as that's approaching.
Yep, your timing is fantastic, because I was just visiting with Principal Helke today about developing that communication, and he'd been working on some things and was just calling even today just to confirm that as of right now, things continue to move forward. And with everything COVID related, we always try to use language that gives us an opportunity to adjust if things need to. But yes, we are planning to move forward, and there will be information coming out very shortly. Prom is on track, which I believe is a week and a half, coming up pretty quickly. But yes, graduation information coming forward soon.
So thank you for that question. I just said to staff today, it's May is here. It's end of the year. So yes, it is a special time of the year, and so we'll be getting some more information to you.
Can I just add one? I'm sorry. Just as discussed before, for those who may not have, from the home audience, tuned in before, they are still tentatively planning for 2 graduation ceremonies, split ceremonies, so that they are smaller and can do that in person. So again, just as a part of those details, I believe we talked about those times at a previous board meeting. They are talking about split ceremonies outdoors, scheduling the Friday, which would normally be graduation, with Saturday already scheduled as a backup for a potential weather impacted graduation ceremony.
Awesome. Thank you.
Other additional questions or comments? Dr. Allen?
I just had a couple. Just a clarification on the decision about activities. And is it athletics only, or is it athletics and activities outdoors, specifically with students not wearing masks?
Thank you, Director Alt. Bernie may need to help me because we just received the guidance. I think it's embedded in the Minnesota guidance for both youth activities. So they give guidance on both, but we'll get that more detailed information. So Bernie, I don't know if you have more details.
My understanding is that guidance is more towards youth activities outside sports activities, as far as like, recess or FIAD that might be outside. We still are promoting that the children wear their masks because we know that that is the safest for them in those settings.
So, for instance, any outdoor activity, whether it's athletic or not, this new guidance would cover, or not athletics.
The guidance doesn't really address non-athletics. It is, and I will have to look it over, but to my understanding, it is clearly athletics that it's addressing.
I guess I'm just asking because I know we have activities over the summer that are non-athletic, like marching band is an obvious one that comes to mind. I think it might be, the families might appreciate understanding how the guidance would affect that kind of activity.
Yeah, great information for me to pass on to MDH so that they can start gathering their guidance for us.
Thank you. And then a question on Club Nicollet. I'm assuming that since it's offered only at Nicollet, that we're providing transportation for any Eagle Ridge students that would want to attend before or after school?
So all of the middle school students from both middle schools attend there. So Lisa Ryder, do you have specific information about transportation?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a shuttle going from Eagle Ridge over to Nicollet after school. I believe most families are choosing to utilize the Club Nicollet throughout the entire day. And, but I can check on that just to be sure.
I'm sorry, so it's actually for like when cohort B is not in session.
That's where most families are taking advantage of that, yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it would be nice to know if there is any crossover, for when kids are attending school in their cohort, but also need that before and after school.
I will follow up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Additional questions, comments? Okay, and just for clarification, if I heard right, the guidance on outdoor activities and/or sports was merely that MDH guidance at this time. It does not necessarily translate to decisions or actions we've taken at this point, correct?
Well, so yes, that is guidance, but if the public and for board recall, we have meetings every Thursday with our activities group. Bernie Bean was sitting in as a part of that today. We did get it today and did review each of our sports through that and did determine for those outdoor sports that we supported following the MDH guidance. And again, Bernie, a part of that conversation, we did take it sport at a time and just talked about that. So for example, baseball, using that example, when you think about the players in the field, they're not even close to 6 feet apart and supported certainly that. And again, took that same rationale through all of our activities, insisting that Guillaume Pack, our athletic director, share with coaches that the expectation has to be firm when they are not participating in the competition or in the practice of the event. And when they're coming together, the masks were absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for everybody, and I think this was again a great representation of the amount of consideration and work that goes into these decisions. So now we will move to section in our information portion of our meeting for committee, board appointment, and school assignment reports. So beginning with committees, I'll just pick at the legislative committee. I believe Director Hume is going to present tonight on that.
Yes, thank you. The legislative committee had its monthly meeting on Tuesday, April 13th. State Senator Eric Pratt, who represents the portion of our district in Shakopee, joined us, and we shared information with him about our district and about our district's 2021 legislative platform. It was a short but informative meeting, and we appreciate his taking the time to join us on what was obviously a very busy day for him at the state legislature. And that concludes my report.
Excellent. And negotiations.
Thank you. Negotiations has not yet met, but I am pleased to report that we do have meetings scheduled. Our first series of meetings scheduled with the BEA this next month. We will be meeting May 10th at 6 p.m., Thursday, May 20th at 6 p.m., and then again Monday, May 24th at 6 p.m., and these meetings will be live streamed. So if folks want to tune in and listen to the discussions, we certainly welcome that.
Okay, thank you. Policy.
Policy met April 12th, and we had all but one of the policies that we reviewed are going back to staff for revision. And then the next time we meet is May 17th at 5:30, and that meeting, of course, is virtual too, so folks can tune in there.
Okay. So those are the standing board committees. The SPA, Student Performance and Achievement, is a committee of the whole, and we have those meetings publicly here. School assignments. Anybody want to jump in on the school assignments portion?
I have one.
Yes.
So it's representative for intermediate 917. I have a report. At the beginning of April, we had our standard board meeting in which the board approved extending the offer to Dr. John Christensen to serve as the next superintendent. And then yesterday afternoon, there was a special board meeting announcing that Intermediate District 917 Board has approved a special offer of employment to Dr. John Christensen contingent upon approval of a special license from the Minnesota Board of School Administrators, which is expected on May the 26th. And his title will be Acting Superintendent. Mr. Zuzek will be Assistant Superintendent, as he will still be performing some administrative duties. And the Dr. Christensen start date will be April the 27th, and the employment will run through June 30th with flexible work hours. And main duties will include working with Mr. Zuzek to complete the school year, mentoring incoming. The extended offer was for Dr. Favor. Sorry, so I'm getting confused. So we have an interim serving to do the transition, to then have Dr. Favor serve as full superintendent of starting July 1st. That concludes my report.
Any other board appointment or school assignment reports? Yes.
I wanted to report that I met with Principal Buchanan at Gideon Pond. She and I talked, for over an hour, and I just really enjoyed the information that she shared with me about the Gideon Pond community and how the students are doing, and the efforts that that she and her staff are really implementing to try to maintain family and student engagement despite the pandemic, and of course thinking about achievement of the students and really how to connect up with each individual student to make the most of their school day. So just a really great conversation. We're very blessed to have her.
Yes.
I also have a school assignment report. I understand these are normally pretty short, but my school assignment is Burnsville High School, and I met with Principal Helke for an hour and a half and did a tour. And I wrote up about a page and a half, so. On Friday, April 9th, I met with Principal David Helke at 10 a.m. to begin a site visit and tour. We began with a brief discussion, then we set out for our tour of the school. My main intention for my visit was to get familiar with the on-site services offered at the high school, as well as what the day in the life of a high school student in our Pathways programs looks like. We started through the offices where I was able to briefly meet two of the high school cultural liaisons, Cujo and Hector. Then down the hall of the guidance counselors, where I also briefly met Scott Harrison. Then we made our way to the Career Center, where I met Marcia Sexton, who I understand is a very vital resource to our college and career center and is very good at what she does in helping our students with setting up college visits, learning about post-secondary options. I also learned that in the design of the current Career Center, it previously had solid walls, and in redesigning, had the clear windows installed to make the space more inviting and open. After that, we visited the nursing and EMT classroom space that previously housed a locker room for the pool. This is now part of the medical healthcare pathways, where certifications can be earned prior to graduation. The teacher wasn't there for me to meet, but I could certainly get a good feel for how this classroom works with its hospital beds and medical equipment set up in the room. Next, we were off to an IT computer classroom where I met one of the teachers while a class was going on. She talked about how the students in the program were being offered internships over the summer to help wipe and clean the Chromebooks as part of the technology program. What a wonderful opportunity for these students. Dave then took me down to the new wing of the high school where we had the addition built. We added on new classrooms and a large commons area where students are now dropped off and enter the building from the buses. There's a large, beautiful mural that says, "We are Burnsville." It has more of a college feel than of a high school. It is very cool, and it makes me wish I were still in high school. Our next stop was the prefab lab, where I was introduced to teachers Nick Wolf and Orion Patry, who head up aerospace engineering and industrial technology. This lab is nothing short of amazing. The equipment our students get to use for the projects are top-notch. Orion took us on a tour of the lab and went over the different machinery and what the students are able to use them for. From embroidering hats and shirts to cutting out keychains to engraving water bottles, they really get to do a variety of projects that set them up for the manufacturing environment. He even told me how they are working with other school programs to partner with them to create merchandise and sell it to them for marketing. So many great things are happening in our Pathways program. It is very impressive. You know, a Pathways tour wouldn't be complete without visiting the woodworking and the automotive programs. So off we were to the garage that previously housed buses for the high school and was transformed into our automotive and woodworking building. I was also fortunate to meet Russ Tesmer, teacher for the automotive program, who was also responsible for allowing the automotive program to be housed in this building by taking the proper measurements and schematics to make sure we had the space needed. Russ has been teaching with the district for over 30 years, so he's very dedicated to this program. It was great to see what goes into this program, the welding stations, the auto body, and then the regular mechanics. He showed how all the parts of a car were on the floor and disassembled, and the students would then be learning by reassembling them into the car. I believe the car they were working on was a car that was in fact donated by Principal Dave Helke's mother. For our last few stops, we made our way back into the main campus building and visited an early childhood learning class for students wanting to take the preschool program. The room is set up in that they can bring in pre-K children at some point and interact with them and observe their behavior and apply what they are learning in the program. Lastly, we popped into the culinary program and a class that was in session and would be learning about knives and how to use them. This completed my tour, and Dave walked me back to the entrance. All in all, I can say that our Pathways program is outstanding, and I was blown away by the knowledge and dedication of our teachers and staff that work with our students to make sure they are equipped with tools and resources to help them reach their education and career goals in a way that not many school districts can. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any other reports?
Unfortunately, I did have a few comments from AMSD, but I came just from another appointment and I forgot to bring it. So if it's not too old by the next time,
That's quite all right. Thank you. Okay. All right. Then we'll move to the final part of our information portion of our meeting tonight, and that is I am going to give an update about listening sessions. The Burnsville-Egan Savage School District 191 Board of Education is reinstating in-person listening sessions beginning May 13th, 2021. In-person listening sessions, which allow for public input, have not been held since March 19th, 2020 due to the state of emergency and pandemic. The public was encouraged and continues to be encouraged to email the board. Beginning on May 13th, in-person listening sessions will be held from 5:45 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. before each regular school board meeting. During in-person listening sessions, strict social distancing will apply, and the number of non-speaking participants will be limited. Community members who wish to share their thoughts and opinions on meeting topics should sign up for a listening session by contacting the Superintendent's Office at 952-707-2005 or register in person before the listening session begins. The listening sessions will not be recorded, and participants are encouraged to write out their comments for the record. Policy 206, the listening session guidelines, and a registration card have been included in the board packet online for anyone's reference. A recommendation to reinstate the listening session has been added to the consent agenda. And this ends my report. I'll just add in a couple of notes as I was reading that, and I realized, just to be very clear, pre-registration before the listening session begins is a requirement per our policy. And any comments that are, the reason we encourage people to write out their comments, then they will be handed in. You should bring a copy and hand them in, and they'll be submitted into the record. Any questions or comments about my report? Okay. Then we are going to now transition to the business meeting component of our agenda tonight, beginning with our consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. This time I'll ask if there's any desire to move anything off the consent agenda. Not hearing any. I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Connor. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Connor?
Aye.
Chester?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Said?
Aye.
Alt?
Aye.
Werb?
Aye.
Hume?
Aye.
The motion to approve tonight's consent agenda passes unanimously. Now to the new business section of our evening. We will begin with item to improve insurance rates. Presenting will be Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Human Resources.
Good evening, Chair Miller, members of the board, Dr. Battle. I'm bringing to you tonight a recommendation to approve our benefits rates premiums. They cover 4 different areas: our health, self-insurance, dental, group life, long-term disability. Group life and long-term disability have no increases this year, so that is a flat rate. Our health insurance and our dental insurance, health insurance represents a 2.5% increase. Our dental reflects a 0.5% increase. Over the last 5 years, our average rate of increase has been 3.35%, with our high water mark being 4 years ago at the 5%. Many of the board members will recall that we are moving towards a strategy of consistency in our plan and our premium increases. so that we land anywhere between 2 to 5%, kind of in that low single-digit range. We have started our open enrollment process next week. Informational meetings will begin. And last year, one of the interesting things that we had with our COVID experience was when we did our open enrollment meetings, we actually broke the internet. We had too many people apply or try to log on through Zoom, so we had to get a higher grade account with them. We've never had the amount of turnout that we have than what we do when we present virtually for open enrollment. So that is, we're expecting that same type of turnout again this year, and look forward to that as people take interest in their health insurance coverage. With all of that, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approves the FY22 premiums and rates for employee benefits. Below are the premium rates for the respective employee benefits for our July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022 plan years. This is the total premium. Each individual unit has a different rate based upon bargaining that they contribute. But health self-insured employee benefit, family coverage, the annual premium of $26,346.96 and a $2,000 HRA contribution for a monthly combined premium of $2,362.24. Again, that is the total premium. That doesn't include the employee contribution to that. Single coverage, the annual premium of $10,272.36 and a $1,000 HRA contribution for a monthly combined premium of $939.36. The 0.5% increase for dental self-insured employee benefits, family coverage, full monthly premium of $99.69 and an annual cost of $1,196.28. Single coverage, full monthly premium of $38.17 and an annual cost of $458.04. Again, our group life insurance and our long-term disability insurance are flat, and they are at 0.066 cents per $1,000 for life insurance and 0.0418 of a cent per $1,000 income for long-term disability.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion for the action in front of us?
So moved.
Director Hume.
Second.
Seconded by Director Alt. Discussion, questions?
Are you giving us the full premium amount for the year when you give us the 26,000? Is that for the employee for the year?
No, that is the total premium. And then within each contract, they'll have a certain percentage of a contribution that the district makes and that the employee then is responsible for. So for many of our staff, you know, it may be a 70% contribution from the district for the premium, and the other 30% is the responsibility of the employee.
Okay, so this may not reflect what's actually coming out of the employee's check.
No.
Okay.
No, actually much less.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Hester?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Said?
Aye.
Alt?
Aye.
Werb?
Aye.
Hume?
Aye.
Connor?
Aye.
The motion in front of us passes. Now we will move to approve amendment to the FY21 revised budget. Presenting will be Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services.
Thank you. I believe I have shared my screen, and you should now be seeing the general fund budget comparative summary on your on the screen. Okay. So with that, thank you for the opportunity, Chair Miller, Directors of the Board, and Superintendent Battle to bring to you tonight the amendment to the current 2020-2021 fiscal revised budget. This is not as typical. On an annual basis, we usually revise the budget once. However, this year, as we've heard conversations over our budget for the current year and into the planning for next year, this amendment to the budget is being requested for purposes of addressing our current budget and the expenditures that we anticipate we will not be spending in the general fund, as well as making some adjustments to the food service fund and to our debt service fund. The other funds have not changed and is included in the recommendation. I will talk about that in a moment. To begin, I want to start with this slide here that is the comparative summary. And I would like to point out the revised budget that was approved by the board in January showed, in essence, the variance of revenues less expenditures for the year of $536,494, where our expenditures exceeded the revenues. Therefore, it was a deficit projected spend for the year and resulted in a fund balance then that was unassigned of $10,229,923. The April revised budget, the amendment to the revised budget that's coming to you now, is in essence decreasing the amount of the expenditure budget by the amount of $1,693,788. And I'll show you in a moment where those are coming from. Because of the reduction in the expenditures for the current year's budget, then it does change the variance where now our revenues exceed our expenditures by $1,157,294. This results in an unassigned projected fund balance of $12,088,711, which would calculate out to be a 9.12% of unassigned fund balance. This is a projection at this time, but the adjustment to the expenditure budgets do change that information. Therefore, the recommendation that is before the board tonight does not require any longer a waiver of the fund balance policy, which calls for 8% unassigned fund balance. I would now like to change the screen so that you are seeing the adjustments here for, this is included in the budget information, the documents that we have. So for the 2021 revised budget by budget unit report, you'll see multiple pages. And in this, we are showing each budget unit, which, as you will recall, we have taken our entire general fund expenditure budget and divided it into these subgroups that we call budget units. And so, for instance, the first one is the general elementary instruction. And how much do we spend on personnel? So you can see the dollar amounts from the revised budget compared to the amended budget, and that there was no change in this particular budget unit. And the FTEs are unchanged throughout this entire budget for the general fund. We did not modify the FTEs in the budget. They remain the same as they were January 21st. And what is changing is only dollar amounts on the expenditure. You will note that under 01030, which is our general elementary instruction substitutes, that we are decreasing that budget by $130,000. And similarly, you can look down the pages and see those adjustments as to what it is that totals the amount of the $1,693,788. And that is the adjustment to the general fund. The enrollment assumptions remain at the revised budget amounts of 7,890 ADMs. The expenditure budget reductions are in the areas as shown here, and do reflect the underspending we anticipate due to the shifting of learning models throughout the year. I will note that the federal funding within our expenditure budgets for the general fund remain unchanged and continue to include our coronavirus relief funds, our ESSER 1 and our GEAR 1 funds. There are also no adjustments again to the overall general fund FTEs from the revised budget. I will now stop sharing my screen And let's just discuss a little bit about the food service fund. The food service fund, you will note, does have a decrease from the revised budget for both revenues and expenditures of approximately a reduction of $1.3 million. So what we've done is we've gone through and adjusted the revenues down as well as the expenditures down for the food service fund. And this is to update and reflect the revenues that we're generating for the summer food service program versus what is typical, the national school lunch and breakfast program. We are no longer offering that this year, as what is available to our families is the summer food service program. The reimbursement rate and the volume of meals that we're serving is different from the previous years, and so therefore we adjusted the budget to reflect that. On the expenditure side of the food service fund, you will note that there's an adjustment there, and I want to point out the fact that we have received additional commodities. So as other school districts that are not running food service programs for their communities have backed away from services, then they have commodities that they were afforded for the school year. When they are not utilizing those commodities, the state has then offered those to other school districts that are functioning and running their food service programming. So because we are and we have the need, we've taken advantage of those additional commodities, which come to us at very little or no cost. So that has helped us quite a bit, as well as the, I shouldn't say a help, but the reality we're also dealing with is the understaffing. We just do not have as many staff available for the work that we've had in past years, and so that has been modified as well. Many of our staff that are on leave have chosen to be on leave and are no longer possibly being paid during this time as well. So that has reduced our budget in the food service fund as well. The community service fund has not changed from the revised budget in January. It has been reviewed in detail for line items on both the revenue side as well as the expenditure side. And the feeling is that they have, that it does reflect the anticipated end of year revenues and expenditures for the community service fund. Our debt service fund was shifted slightly. As you see, it's just a very balanced, and it does now reflect the refunding payments resulting from the 2020A refunding bonds that paid off the 2011A bonds when they were callable in February. So with that, then I would read the recommendation for the board that the Board of Education approves the amendment to the 2020-2021 revised budget, providing revenues and expenditures in all funds as follows, and is reflected on the recommendation.
Thank you, Director Ryder. Before proceeding, I am going to put forward a motion that we recess for a short recess to accommodate our Muslim friends who have breaking fast at Ramadan here at the top of the hour. So I will put forward a motion we recess until 8:15. May I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Kenny, will you quickly read the roll, please?
Miller,
Aye.
Saeed,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Chester.
Aye.
The motion passes and we are in recess. Thank you. The recess has ended. We will come back to order. So in front of us was, we had a presentation from Lisa Ryder, Director of Business Services, on a recommendation to approve an amendment to FY21 revised budget. May I have a motion on the recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester. A second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Said. I will open this up for discussion.
I have one
Question, yes.
It's not really a question, but well, maybe it is. I had noted in the I think I had seen on news or in a posting that the USDA just recently approved free lunches for all students going through next school year. Just wanting to hear an update about that, or if that's, just wanted to make a note of that.
Chair Miller, directors, and Director Chester. So the food service account. So yes, Director Ryder, we did hear yesterday from the U.S. Department of Education on media reports. I don't know if we received the official notification yet. So if you have a comment about that, because it will impact our food service budget. Go ahead.
Typically, how this works is we hear first from the federal level, which is what we heard yesterday. And then from there, the state level will take into account how it is that they will, how that will manifest for us. And so essentially the summer food service program is likely to maintain, but we need to hear that directly from the Department of Minnesota, Department of Education, and to understand the flow through of that program as it will exist for us here in Minnesota.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, if my memory serves me right, Lisa, federal funding for such food services, if it comes directly, is usually very targeted, correct? If it was truly to cover all services, it would probably, as you implied, it would have to flow through state funding, correct?
Right, so we are functioning under a federal program with the Summer Food Service Program. And it's my understanding that that is likely what they're planning to just extend across the nation. And I just don't know for certain that that's the manner in which Minnesota will handle that. And so there's the federal waivers that are required in order for then the state of Minnesota to determine how they will then flow that program through to the school districts within Minnesota. So we just need to hear the word from the Minnesota Department of Education regarding how that federal program will now flow through to us.
Okay.
And then when it does, that means we don't have to spend the school budget federal money when it does?
Well, we've been functioning under the Summer Food Service Program for the past school year. And with this in place, what this has meant for families is that they have not been charged and meals have been distributed without any requirement of qualification of free, reduced, or full pay eligibility being addressed. And so meals were available, have been available, continue to be available. And we knew this was going to be the case through September 30th. What they have done is they have extended that deadline at the federal level to June 30th, 22. And so now we just need to make sure that the state of Minnesota is intending to have that flow through here in our state as well.
Not to derail the FY21 amendment conversation, but kind of to dovetail on this conversation, because it is kind of timely. When I read that as well, Director Chester, I was wondering about our situation and appreciating that there were comments made by federal officials that they want to reduce the paperwork that schools and families have to deal with. There's also a hidden implication with that, because we need those applications filled out for other purposes, for other funding. We've talked about how, the tech discounts that we get as a result of our free and reduced lunch population, and compensatory funding. So I guess I'll just wear the hat that, knowing that this is coming, we need to figure out what that application process is going to look like for our families, because it's so critical. And it can't simply be, I mean, saying that it's, educational benefits. We need to keep educating our families as we have, and appreciating that they're the videos that we shared out with our families. I think that was awesome. But we can't have another year where families don't appreciate the significance of those applications.
So thank you, Director Alt, for that. So the increase that you see here in the revised budget, it's good to unpack that we still need families to apply for their benefits because it also impacts other funding sources. And so this is under the summer food program also, as noted in the board recommendation. So that's what we received notification that it's continuing for next year.
Is that for breakfast and lunch, or just lunch?
The summer food program does allow for the breakfast and lunch, and we have taken advantage of snacks being available where possible. That is dependent upon your area eligibility. So that waiver did allow us to provide snacks to families as well. So sometimes that can be applied, and sometimes we have to back off on the snacks, but certainly breakfast and lunch.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, additional questions or desire for clarification around the amendment in front of us? Yes.
I just, maybe I missed it, and I don't know if this is a question, Lisa, for you, or Brian, for you. The curriculum and instructional reductions, where are those coming from? The change in the amendment.
Right, so Amina and I went through all of the line items of the budgets that you see reflected under the budget units that are the 15,000 budget units, which reflect the teaching and learning area. And it was only through her and I working through each line to identify where she felt they were likely not to spend those funds this year, just given the lack of the limited number of days in which we did have students in our buildings for part of the year. And so the line items that you see reflected as an adjustment down for the expenditure budget in this amendment have all been worked through directly with the director for those programs.
So even though we had Wednesdays and as pre-established professional development days, that didn't happen in the way that Amina had expected?
It didn't require, with the schedule, it didn't require additional pay to teachers for those days as it was worked into our current schedule.
Got it. So it's really about the overtime pay.
Correct.
The most of the reductions are coming from that overtime pay because we were able to do it differently. Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Additional questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Then we'll go to the vote. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Said,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Miller.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. We will now move to next action to approve school resource officer agreement. Presenting will be Brian Gersich, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Miller, Board of Directors, and Dr. Battle. Again, I'm back this evening to bring forward a recommending approval for the SRO agreement. This was presented in more detail at the April 8th meeting. Certainly this was, as stated at the time, a pretty significant overhaul from our previous agreement for school resource officer services. Since that time, there have been a few minor adjustments that I'd like to point out to you based on some feedback as well as a logistical piece that I'll share. You'll notice that there's two attachments in board book. One is dated SRO agreement changes with the February 8th date on it, and I'll direct your attention to that because that is where those changes are highlighted. At the top on the first page, you'll notice that the date, it was August 1st. Actually, it is July 1st. Our previous agreement expires on June 30th, and it also then aligns with our Section 10, which is the term, so that those dates are consistent. Thanks to Lisa Ryder for finding that particular error when we were presenting at the last meeting. The next two changes are just small changes on page 1 and page 10. Those are based on the great question from Director Alt about some of the language and where we have that inclusion of staff, both when it talks about communication, which is on page 1 in the mission section, and then on page 10, adding some staff, basically a staff piece to the professional development piece in the language at the top of page 10. So again, some minor changes from what you saw before that were communicated and got the approval from Captain Stenger, who's been my partner that I've been working with at the Burnsville Police Department. So again, they are supportive of those changes. And so therefore, in reference to the second attachment that does have today's date on it, which would be the clean copy and the most updated version, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approves the School Resource Officer Agreement.
Very well. May I have a motion for the recommendation in front of us?
So moved.
Director Webb? Sorry. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Director Said. Discussion, comments? Yes, Director.
Just one, thank you to you and Captain Stenger and everyone that was involved in shaping this agreement, the students, from the students to the families. This is just such a great shift for us, and not necessarily changing what the SRO is doing in the schools, but outlining for us, clearly what expectations are and what we're going to be looking like moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. And again, absolutely a team effort on that one throughout our team and the Burnsville Police Department.
Any other questions or comments? I'd just like to also express my personal and this board's heartfelt thankfulness for everybody involved in the negotiations process, but primarily to Chief Schwartz and her staff for the opportunity to continue a long-held relationship with the Burnsville Police Department that is important to our community. I am ecstatic about the partnership that we're creating here, not creating, but extending, and the opportunity that it presents for our students, the opportunity it presents for the safety of our community. And personally, as a parent of 3 students that are headed towards the high school in the coming years, it makes me feel so much more comfortable that I know that we have not just safety in place, but competent, partners that are part of what we're doing in the community. So thank you very much. All right. So that being said, Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Alt.
Aye.
Werb.
Aye.
Hume.
Aye.
Connor.
Aye.
Chester.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Said.
Aye.
The motion in front of us passes unanimously. We will now move to the next item to approve the Birth to 8 Joint Powers Agreement Amendment. Dr. Battle presenting, Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Miller and directors of the board. I want to provide a little background information to this recommendation to approve the revision to the Birth to 8 Joint Powers Agreement, the amendments. So the board received a report about this agreement at its regular meeting on August 27, 2020, and the board approved it on September 10, 2020. We have made minor updates to this agreement. There was an initial pilot program, and that initial JPA that you approved had the pilot dates, and so we need to extend the dates of this program beyond the pilot. Also, any references to pilot were changed in the amendment. The amendment has been reviewed by our district attorney and is attached for your review. The Birth to 8 initiative brings together key stakeholders from public health, human services, community nonprofits, and education in Dakota County. And the aims of the agreement are really to assure that children reach key developmental milestones from birth through age 8. Early identification is key, and we have the vision with our partners that 100% of children identified shall meet the state proficiency reading target by the spring of 3rd grade. They use a stoplight, red, yellow, or green. to identify where children are on these key developmental milestones. The process is completely voluntary. Parent and guardians must sign consent before enrolling. And this agreement allows for our information to go into the portal. It allows districts in Dakota County to access the portal for use in services to families. Our first phase of this is targeted for our early learners, and then next year we will start with elementary age learners till we go up to age 8. And so with that, I put forward this recommendation that the Board of Education approve the Birth to 8 Joint Powers Agreement amendments.
Thank you. I will take a motion for the recommendation in front of us.
So moved?
I'm sorry.
Somebody else said it, but I was going to.
I can't see lips move.
Yeah, I know.
Director Ault.
Second.
Moved by Director Ault and seconded by Director Connor. Maybe I'm going to start asking people to say their names when they do this.
You should read the paddle.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions or comments on the recommendation?
I like this proposal, that's all.
Okay. Seeing none in front of us, Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Werb,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Alt.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. All right, then we are to our final piece of new business tonight, to adopt a resolution approving a purchase agreement presenting Dr. Ryder, or Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have this on the agenda tonight. We have spent the last couple of weeks working to confirm the information that is before you. You should have the resolution that you were able to see that has been drafted by our attorney with the commercial purchase agreement, which is a Word document, also drafted by our attorney, and the addendums to the purchase agreement, which include the forms, the realty forms that you'll find that is for the general information, the due diligence, and financing. Additionally, there is a memorandum attached to the board book for you that was crafted by Stacy Kilvane of Ellers. And this summarizes the adjustments that were made from the original conversation as the review of the document was made by the buyer and ourselves. And so I am happy to answer any questions. And I know that Stacy is also available if we should have some questions for her as well. But I would suggest that the recommendation before you is that the Board of Education adopts a resolution approving the purchase agreement between ISD 191 and Abdahali Jama.
Okay. May I have a motion for the recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume. The second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Director Werb. I will open it up for discussion. Yes, Director Ault.
Just a technical question. I noticed that there is equipment that will be removed from River Ridge, refrigerator, washer dryer, monitors, and then another refrigerator. Will we be repurposing them, and if so, how?
Yeah, they'll be moved to the new program area for the BEST program.
Any additional questions or comments? Well, I'd just like to, it feels a little anticlimactic at the end of our meeting for such a significant event for this district, but this is a pretty big deal. I want to thank everybody involved, especially our external services that we've hired to help with this. We barely settled after choosing our broker and such, and they turned it around into a sale, so this is fantastic. This is good news for the district. We got a real fair market price, better at the top end of what we thought we were going to be getting. So, and it's an excellent the seller brings forward an excellent package. It's not just the price point. They're able to bring forward a normal, regular package of an offer without any kind of shenanigans inside of it, so we're looking good as a district. This is great. All right, Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Hume,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Werb.
Aye.
With that, the motion passes unanimously, and I will now take us to adjournment. We are done for the evening. Thank you.